A good number of men between 75 and 90 end up in a surgeon's office at some point, sitting across from someone explaining what the procedure involves and what it might take from them afterward. If you're in that age range and you've avoided that conversation so far, you did something right, even if you never quite figured out what it was. I didn't figure it out either, not for years. I'm 83. I sat in a waiting room at 79, my name already on a surgery schedule, certain I was headed for the same operation 3 of my closest friends had already had. In the next few minutes, I'll tell you what actually got my name pulled off that list, and it wasn't the thing I tried first. These days, I still see my urologist every year like clockwork, and every year he tells me the same thing: no surgery needed, keep doing what you're doing. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because for a long time I assumed surgery was simply inevitable if you lived long enough, and I was wrong about that. My name went on that surgery list the ordinary way. Years of getting up more at night, years of a stream that had gone from strong to hesitant to something I had to wait for standing at the sink, cursing under my breath. It got to the point where I mapped out bathrooms before I left the house, the way some men check the weather, the gas station on the way to the hardware store, the diner 2 blocks from my barber, the church restroom I could reach fastest during the sermon if I had to slip out quietly. My doctor at the time laid out the options plainly: medication first, and if that didn't hold, surgery down the road. I took the medication. It helped some, for a while, but the trips to the bathroom kept creeping back, and 18 months later I was sitting in that surgical consultation, listening to a very kind man explain recovery time and risks I didn't love the sound of: catheters, weeks of adjustment, and a short list of things that might not come back the way they'd been before. I drove home that day and didn't tell my wife the details for almost a week. I just wasn't ready to say the words out loud yet. 3 friends of mine had already gone through with it by then. 2 came out fine, all things considered. 1 didn't bounce back the way he'd hoped, and he never quite talked about it the same way again after that. I kept thinking about him every time my own appointment got closer on the calendar. Around that same time, a neighbor of mine, a man about my age, mentioned he'd had good luck with saw palmetto, the extract from a certain palmberry that half the men in our circle seemed to be taking. I figured it was worth trying before committing to an operation. I bought a bottle at the pharmacy, took it faithfully for 4 months, and noticed almost nothing. No worse, but not really better either. I remember feeling a little embarrassed, telling my neighbor it hadn't done much for me, like maybe I was doing something wrong. It turns out I wasn't doing anything wrong. What I found out later from a retired urologist friend I finally sat down with before signing anything is that the largest and most careful study ever done on saw palmetto alone, following hundreds of men for over a year, found it performed no better than a sugar pill at any dose tested. He wasn't dismissive about it. He said the disappointing part wasn't that men were imagining an effect from a fake remedy. It was that saw palmetto by itself genuinely seems to fall short for a lot of men, and nobody tells you that before you spend months hoping it'll work. What he told me next is what actually changed things. He said the research tells a very different story when saw palmetto is combined with stinging nettle root, a plant that's been used for generations for urinary comfort. Studied together over many months, closer to 2 years than a few weeks, the combination showed real, measurable improvement in urinary symptoms for a meaningful number of men, not saw palmetto propping up nettle and not the other way around, but the two working through different pathways that seemed to complement each other. He was careful with me, and I appreciated that. He didn't promise it would work for everyone, and he didn't pretend the research on the combination was as large or as famous as the big saw palmetto alone trial that had disappointed me. But he said it was honest, well-documented, and worth trying properly, with real time given to it, before I let a surgical date sit unchallenged on my calendar. That was the difference between him and the pharmacy clerk who'd sold me the bottle of saw palmetto alone 2 years earlier without a word of context. For years, one number ran my life: the PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer. It measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they pushed to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So that's exactly what I did. I stopped taking saw palmetto alone and switched to a combination formula with both saw palmetto and nettle root together. And I gave it real time, not 2 weeks, but a full season, because he warned me plant-based support like this builds gradually rather than hitting all at once. Alongside that, I built 2 more habits into my week. A short walk most evenings, because he explained that circulation to the pelvis matters more than people assume, and cutting back on the beer I used to have most nights, since alcohol seemed to make my evenings noticeably worse. The mechanism made sense the way he explained it. Saw palmetto appears to interact with certain hormone pathways in prostate tissue, while nettle root works through a different route involving proteins that affect fluid balance and inflammation. Alone, each one seems to only move the needle a little for most men. Together, they seem to cover more ground. I won't pretend the improvement was instant. The first 6 weeks felt like nothing had changed, and I nearly gave up more than once, remembering how saw palmetto alone had let me down before. My daughter, who'd been the one to actually track down the combination formula for me after some digging, kept telling me to give it the full season before deciding anything. She'd circle the date on my kitchen calendar herself, 16 weeks out, and tell me not to make any decisions before that circled date arrived. By week 10, I noticed I was getting up twice a night instead of 4 times. By week 16, some nights I only got up once, and a couple of nights I slept clean through until my alarm went off. I called the surgeon's office that same week and asked to push my consultation back 6 months instead of moving forward. The scheduler sounded almost surprised. She said most men who call in are asking to move things up, not push them back. I kept up the evening walks even after the improvement showed up, mostly because I'd started to genuinely enjoy them. My neighborhood at dusk in the fall, porch lights coming on one by one, is a nicer thing to notice than I'd given it credit for over the 20 years I'd lived there without really looking. Last month I helped my grandson move into his first apartment, 4 flights of stairs, boxes all afternoon, and I never once needed to duck into the building's bathroom mid-carry the way I would have 2 years earlier. He commented on it before I said a word. I think about a man named Benny who reached out after an earlier video, 81. A retired school teacher who told me he'd already had 1 consultation about surgery and was dreading the follow-up appointment. He'd tried saw palmetto alone years earlier, too, with the same disappointing nothing I'd experienced, and he'd nearly written off plant-based support altogether because of it, figuring the whole category was overhyped. When I told him about the combination and the actual research behind it, he said it was the first time anyone had explained why his own experience with saw palmetto hadn't matched what he'd read online in the first place. He started the combination formula the same week, added the evening walks a month later, and cut back on the 2 beers he used to have most nights watching the news. He told me the first month felt like nothing again, and he almost quit out of the same disappointment he'd felt before. His wife talked him into finishing out the season he'd promised himself. By the time his follow-up appointment came around, his own numbers had improved enough that his doctor pushed the surgery conversation off entirely, with instructions to keep monitoring closely and come back in 6 months instead of scheduling anything final. Benny told me the strangest part wasn't the physical relief, though that mattered plenty. It was the mental weight that lifted once that surgical date wasn't hanging over every conversation with his wife anymore. He said he hadn't realized how much space it had been taking up in his head until it was gone. If you're on medication already for your prostate or anything else, please talk to your doctor before adding anything new, and never stop a prescribed medication on your own. Keep your regular checkups and your prostate exams without fail every single year, no exceptions. This isn't a replacement for that. It's something you do alongside it, and it only works safely when your doctor knows exactly what you're taking and why. What I want you to walk away with is this. If you tried one thing that didn't work and gave up, you might have stopped 1 ingredient short of what actually helps. That's not me telling you every remedy works. It's me telling you the combination mattered more than the single ingredient. And that's worth knowing before you sign anything. Here's what I settled on: a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once. The growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact. None of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video. Go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. I think about the man I was, sitting in that surgical waiting room, certain my name belonged there. And I think about the man I am now, still going to my checkups every year, still hearing the same good news. That's not luck. That's finally finding the right combination instead of giving up after the first disappointment. If you've ever tried something that didn't work and wondered if you gave up too soon, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one myself. And if this kind of honest explanation is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this coming every week.